Hi, and welcome back to Leadership Development Training, how to effect change within your organization. Today, I'm going to be introducing Module 2, Identifying Industry Best Organizational Change Models, and why none of them are sufficient on their own. In Module 1, we've discussed the change management concept and why it is more critical to understand than ever before. We touched on how hyper technology and artificial intelligence will irrefutably affect commerce and governments, and the need for massive change will only increase. We looked briefly at some of the most important preemptive things to consider, including the use of mindfulness techniques as a proven and necessary tool for the betterment and sustainability of any organization. Now, we'll move on to Module 2, and let me start by saying that although there is an enormous amount of online training that you may receive on organizational change development and implementation, organizational effectiveness, etc., what I am sharing here is slightly different because I do not believe any one OD model is sufficient. And this surprises many because ProSci has managed to somehow corner the market on change management training. I'll touch on my reasoning here in this module, but I'll go much deeper into the discussion in Module 7. In introducing Module 2, I'd like to direct your attention back to the competencies I laid out at the very beginning. Module 2 addresses Competency 3.01.02. Participant will understand key components of relevant organizational development and organizational effectiveness models. Participants will develop critical analysis, synthesize ideas, and determine a path to planning change management initiatives. I would like to begin by offering a paradox. Throughout the change management platform, whether in private enterprise or government, and in every program and university, you will begin to learn, digest, and understand the history and development of the main change management models. We always start with Kurt Lewin's famous unfreeze, change, refreeze model. Lewin, the purported father of change management, developed his model on 3 basic steps which paved the way for present-day OCM initiatives. We also refer to it as CATS, or change as 3 steps. And although there are Lewin champions, for the most part, the OCM world, including academia, are quick to pronounce Lewin's model as being oversimplistic. Many argue Lewin's concept of refreezing is actually inappropriate in today's complex and swiftly changing business environment that requires flexibility, agility, and adaptation. I mentioned I'd like to begin with a paradox because you see the problem is, what if this model, the 3-step process, was never developed by Kurt Lewin? What would happen if this model did not really resemble Kurt Lewin's actual thought process? A September 30, 2015 scholarly article written by Cummings, Bridgman, and Brown takes a deep dive into the factual history of Kurt Lewin and his many-faceted work, including field theory. The authors argue that Lewin never developed the unfreeze, change, refreeze model, and the theory took shape after Lewin's death. The writers fervently explain Lewin's own philosophy was not oversimplistic, but instead a detailed, rich, evidence-based theory arguing groups are in constant adaptation mode rather than the state of either frozen or refrozen. They also purport there is no evidence of the theory of cats found anywhere in Lewin's writings. In fact, the article goes on to purport that there is nowhere in Lewin's writing that he ever mentioned the term refreezing, and the theory is not based on Lewin's viewpoint, but instead based upon others repackaging and marketing what Lewin actually wrote. I am making a direct quote here from Unfreezing Change as 3 Steps, Rethinking Kurt Lewin's Legacy for Change Management by Cummings, Bridgman, and Brown. And I will reference the citation in the endnotes at the end of the program after Module 10. Here's the thing. Instead, this article suggests that the first mention of unfreezing, stabilizing, and refreezing as a concept of change was in 1950 in a conference paper written by Lewin's former student Leon Festinger. So what are we meant to do now? Does this make the Lewin model irrelevant and obsolete? And my answer is no. The unfreeze, change, refreeze theory is the backbone to all other change management theories, and the scholarly writing implies that Lewin's personal philosophy was more complex than a simple 3-step model, wherein the father of change management considered the area of change to require future complex thought with a focus on adaptability. So my point is, this model was never sufficient. In fact, it wasn't even sufficient for Kurt Lewin. Yet it lays the ground for change management as we know it. The point of this module is to consider that there is no one perfect change model, and instead I suggest a blend of OCM models and methods should be employed when creating all change management initiatives. So let's go ahead and look at John Kotter's almost perfect model. Number 1, create urgency. In the Kotter model, everything comes back to urgency, the need to create a compelling reason why change is necessary, and then the act of influencing internal and external stakeholders of any and all organizations to move from a current state to a future state in an immediate and impactful way. How? Through diligent research, utilizing cold data, developing meaningful quantitative analytics, and relying on facts. A compelling and urgent story is developed, and above all else is articulated clearly with focus and conviction. Smart leadership will understand the story, mission, and the change will need to be redelivered as many times as it takes so that no opportunity for misunderstanding exists. Urgency creates momentum, and momentum moves mountains. Number 2, form a powerful coalition. Cotter tells us building an alliance of change agents and change champions is critical. If you conduct a search, you will find YouTube gurus regurgitating this exact comment, this exact point from Cotter. The problem is they don't provide you with the how or the why. One why is that we do not live and work in a vacuum. Even a solopreneur needs backup. It is critical for our personal momentum as change catalyst, and it is also critical as a basic tenet of public relations. A coalition offers social proof and is a basic tool used in influencing and motivating. As to how? Well, the best way to build a strong coalition is to solicit help. That means from the inception, bring in allies, onboard those that are close, that will rise to support you, but then actually allow them to help. Allow them to knock around ideas and brainstorm, and above all else, take ownership of the change idea far in advance of it becoming a change plan. It's critically important that you make sure your coalition knows and especially sees your appreciation of them, their support, and their ideas. Number 3, create a vision for change. In my opinion, the most important aspect of creating a vision for change is to make the vision relevant. Who is likely to be impacted, either positively or negatively, by this change? Develop the vision with these people in mind. Be entirely clear on the impact and be ready to address how the anticipated negatives may be mitigated and how the positives can not only be achieved but built on and made even better. In other words, what I'm saying is that savvy leadership will create a vision outside of their own vacuum and instead create a vision which speaks to the interests of those impacted. Make it their vision, not simply your vision. Other key leadership areas should note and be cognizant that we want to be concise. We need to have clarity. We need to have focus. And these are all addressed in Cotter's 4th element. Number 4, communicate the vision. Now that you and your strong coalition have developed a vision of the necessary change and you have purposefully made it relevant to the internal stakeholders so there is a buy-in and implementation will be more easily achieved, smart change catalysts will actually become the change. In other words, communicating the change must become personal. Communicating the change in a vibrant, clear, and enticing way through action, speech, and service. While likely never having been uttered nor written by him, Mahatma Gandhi is attributed as having said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." What I can say that is verifiable is Gandhi was the walking epitome of his vision. To effectively communicate change vision, leaders must be the change vision. Number 5, remove obstacles. Now there could be physical obstacles, but what is more likely is there will be emotional obstacles to change implementation. This is where authentic coaching comes in handy. Coaching by trained, experienced certified coaches who know how to move individuals from current states to future states by effortlessly offering methods for dissolving fear-based thoughts and instead empowering internal stakeholders by creating turnarounds, ways of understanding and perceiving the change. And above all else, the change catalyst will want to deliberately create channels for feedback. You will dismantle emotional roadblocks and obstacles through active listening and heightened emotional intelligence. And while my teaching on EQ and emotional intelligence and empathy and active listening are an entirely separate training, what I want you to know is that effective change catalysts must be willing to hear more than they speak. Number 6, create short-term wins. No one wakes up one day and walks out the door intending to run a marathon. Coming to that conclusion took some time, and they started small. They likely started by buying the right shoe. It's a place to start. It's an idea which required some consideration, then an action, and in the end resulted in a win. The win is that perfectly suited running shoe with which now they can take the next step. It is the same with change management. And it is human nature to require continuous affirmation. When developing the ideation and planning early on with your close coalition, and to be mindful of the internal stakeholders, while you are crafting the vision and making it relevant to these folks, begin to create the plan of action to set up quick wins, to create buy-in and build momentum and sustainability. Number 7, build on the change. In general, step 7 of Kotter's plan is simply rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. A change plan can go south quickly if steps 1 through 6 are not continuously being implemented. Above all else, concentration at this stage on urgency and short-term wins is critical to successful implementation of the change plan. Number 8 of John Kotter's almost perfect model. Anchor the change. Step 8 of Kotter's model speaks to the organization as a whole. Successful change must include holistic adoption of the change. This requires embedding the change, embedding the vision in every aspect of the organization, from onboarding straight through to training, all the way up the ladder and into the executive level meetings. Okay, Kotter's model is great, but it neglects to speak to a few key points. Namely, what happens when you have a visionary leader, someone who is bent on manifesting change even when the organization has a stellar culture as a rock bed foundation? What about when the organization has a healthy ROI? Or what if the enterprise is a happy family with happy shareholders? What happens then? What happens with this visionary maverick leader? And if you think this eventuality doesn't happen, let me share with you that it does. Harvard Business School professor Clay Christensen, who is the developer of the Christensen model of disruption, points to this when he discusses John Sculley, the CEO of Apple Computer circa 1983 to 93. There, a highly successful maverick and visionary comes on board, fires Steve Jobs, and begins to turn everything upside down. It was a colossal failure. Cotter's model doesn't speak to this very real conundrum, but I will be speaking about it when we get to Module 7. Further, Cotter's model fails to address the important construct that change begins with the individual. So let me ask you, what do countries, governments, agencies, enterprises, small businesses, and startups all have in common? They are made up of individuals. It is the individuals that are the backbone of all change initiatives. It is the people that make change. Nor does Cotter adequately address affecting sustainability. So I'm going to address the importance of the individual below, and then I'll get to the point of sustainability when I hit Module 8. So let's go ahead and turn our over to ProSci and their ADKAR model. The ADKAR model is based on the premise that all change begins with the individual, and of course, I agree. Whether change is necessary on a personal level, an organizational level, a world level, change must begin with the individual involved. In other words, it's individuals, not the organization, not the government, and not the worldview that changes. ProSci's ADKAR model is essentially the Certified Coaching 101 model. There is nothing new in ADKAR that any trained coach with a business and executive experience doesn't already know. The brilliant thing about ADKAR is that someone decided, well, Mr. Hyatt actually, decided to take the basic model of coaching and repackage it as a brilliant tool and create an acronym, ADKAR, for that which has been around for many years and now is marketed as the ADKAR model. That notwithstanding, ADKAR is a very good model for the purpose of establishing goals and speaking to the importance of individuals. So let's look at it a little bit more closely. ADKAR, the first A, awareness. To effect change, we need to become aware change is necessary, whether it is an individual who needs to make a personal change in their life or a management team who want to effect change at the enterprise level. Awareness is key. Now, this sounds so entirely obvious that it may seem silly, but what I can share with you is that being unaware of the need for change is actually the norm. Humans are not designed to spot the need for change unless an emergency is underway. It is actually requires great insight to become aware that change is necessary. That is, unless something is irretrievably broken. Depending on your organization, the awareness that change is necessary likely came from one of two sources. Either one, you have a thought incubator in your organization because you're a lucky organization and they do nothing but create and envision innovation and change. Or number two, something is broken. Either leadership is broke, something within the human talent team is broke, a system is broke, communication is broke, a relationship is broke, a state of being is broke. But something is broken, and it's abundantly clear that change is required immediately. Number 2, D, desire. So now we know a change of some sort is necessary, but that doesn't necessarily mean we desire the change. If you are at all familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey model, you will undoubtedly recall that every hero setting out on a quest is initially reluctant. This again is human nature. Remember Luke Skywalker? Was there any would-be hero ever more reluctant than Luke? Well, except there's Bilbo Baggins, and then, of course, there's George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, and the list goes on and on. The point is, all reluctant heroes, you recognize them. They're in literature. They're in our entertainment. We read about them. So you get what I'm saying. The fact that we might be aware a change is necessary isn't the same thing as desiring the change. How does an individual or organization create desire for change? This I'm going to address in Module 7. Knowledge, the K in ADKAR. Often to implement change, especially massive change, new skills are generally necessary. If you wanted to see a shift from being an unskilled speaker who is challenged whenever anyone tasks them to actually present in front of a group of others, to a highly skilled speaker, you will need to develop skills. Generally, this requires some kind of training. This isn't a giant revelation, right? You want to change. It requires new skills, and that will require training. Number 4, ability. So the problem isn't in the knowledge, okay? The problem isn't in understanding that skills and knowledge are required and they'll likely require training. The challenge is when there is a gap between delivering the knowledge and the skill training and actually developing true acumen of the new skill and knowledge. Why is this a challenge? Because change is hard, and sustaining change is even harder. Listen, folks, implementing change and creating momentum and sustainability is sometimes hindered because talent feels inadequate, because they require more practice with the new skill. Then there's managers who feel stressed because they're concerned that their team is falling behind, that they're not meeting the organization's objectives, or the team isn't hitting the projected KPIs, and maybe the metrics are being thrown out the window, and it's indicating that more training is likely necessary. And then there's the executives who are feeling concerned over the skill gap because they have deadlines to meet and possibly shareholders to keep happy. So how can this issue be addressed? I'll be discussing that more in Module 7, but for now, it's critical that I let you know that to simply understand that this is all the fix, the solution is all in the wheelhouse of the competent, trained, and experienced business and executive coach or change specialist. And what you have to understand is that trained, authentic coaches are the change catalysts, okay? They're the specialists. Someone is going to need to coach everyone down off of the chandelier and instead coach them right into a canoe that can be easily navigated and sailed down a river towards the ultimate goal of sustained change. Okay, R, reinforcement. Effective change plan implementation and sustainability are achieved when desire, knowledge, and ability are assessed and reassessed. What does this look like? Well, within a short time and according to a written plan, a date is set for reassessment. There should be a timeline where all resources are identified and met. That's part of a good plan. Reassessment can take the shape of many things, such as one-to-one feedback from the involved talent, to questionnaires, to surveys, to first-hand observation. What do you want to look for? Well, has the change taken root? Go out and observe. Are the internal stakeholders taking ownership and is there buy-in? Are the KPIs being met and indeed measured? Where are things off? Where is new or remedial training necessary? Hey, what is working right? Where are successes being recognized and where are they being celebrated? That's important to celebrate what's working right. In the ProSci ADKAR model, these 5 elements are addressed, and beautifully so. But is that enough? In my opinion, no. ProSci's ADKAR model, using the tried and true coaching model, is absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant at driving home the fact that all change begins with the individual, and it does focus on goals. However, that isn't enough for true organizational change. Whether that organization is a business or a government entity or a nation. ProSci could benefit from teaming its focus on individuals with that of the Johnson-Scholes 6 pillars of the cultural web paradigm. And you may be asking, what is that? Well, it's this paradigm that I'm showing you right now. The paradigm takes into account stories, rituals, symbols, organizational structure, control centers, and power structure. These things matter to effective organizational change. They're important. An enterprise is an entity, and its framework needs to be understood. Its power structure needs to be understood, as do the stories that are told in the org, as do the rituals and routines and the symbols. They craft familiarity and congeniality, and they craft belonging. And that is critical to the successful implementation of change management. To have and implement change management with speed, focus, and clarity, we need to have a blending of the OD models, and we need to have them include the cultural web paradigm. Now, as far as the blending of the models and a deeper dive into the web paradigm, which I think is the best way to enact a change initiative, I will be discussing that much more deeply in Module 8. So this concludes Module 2, Identifying Industry Best Organizational Change Models and Why None of Them Are Sufficient on Their Own. You've learned the key components of relevant organizational development and effectiveness models and why it is critical to conduct analysis, synthesize your ideas, and blend concepts and models when planning change management initiatives. Congratulations, you finished Module 2. I'm excited to have you in this training program, and I will see you over in Module 3. For now, I want you to go and make it an extraordinary day.